club managers, as you're kind of going through your career, you definitely, I think, need to make calculated risks, and I think you really need to lean into your mentors and those who you really rely and trust on to help you navigate and make hard decisions. A lot of times, people make hasty decisions, or they jump because they're really attracted by a title, or they're attracted by a few $1,000s more here and there, without sort of a long-term vision about where they want to be. And sometimes, it's certainly, you see people that sort of have a tendency to jump around, and I get it. Circumstances and life changes, and sometimes you take a job and it's not what you thought it was.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Private Club Radio, the industry source for news, trends, updates, and conversations all around the world of private clubs and high-end hospitality. And when we say private clubs, we mean country clubs, city clubs, yacht clubs, golf clubs, athletic clubs, military clubs, all of the clubs. If you're new to the industry, welcome. If you're a part of the industry, welcome back. Thank you for being here. I'm your host, Denny Corby. In this episode, I'm chatting with Jay Johnson, GM of Southern Hills Country Club in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And he and I were chatting a few weeks ago, just catching up on things. And he said a phrase, and I was like, this is a great episode. It's about the AGM to GM succession. What brought this up was I had a genuine question that I wanted to ask him, which was, he's worked very hard to get to a general manager position. And I've seen this happen to other people, and I've asked a few other people as well, but, what's it like having to go from a GM position to an AGM position? So taking a step back, and that's what led to the conversation a little bit. And he had a great response, and it was all just about the AGM to GM succession plan. So in this instance, it was when he was taking on the position at Southern Hills, he was taking the place of a very well-established club manager, in the club, and the board wanted to make sure they were bringing in another strong general manager. But part of the process was they were going to take another existing good GM, bring them in, make them a GM, to make sure that they get indoctrinated and cultured, ingrained into the club, and to make sure that they are a really good fit. One of my favorite quotes Jay mentioned to me, and it was during our first conversation, and I made him bring it up here, which was, the board told him, you still have to work. You still have to earn the position. It's not guaranteed. So even though he took this big leap, and we talk about calculated risks and being open to unexpected opportunities. Throughout the conversation, Jay shares his experiences in building relationships and trust with his staff and members. And as well as, we get a little vulnerable and opens up to the challenges and kind of frustration sometimes, that was encountered along the way. And if you are friends of Jay, and at the time of this recording, he is not a new dad yet, but he has a new kid on the way next week. And so by the time of this recording, make sure you congrats Jay on his expanding family. 2 kids. Congrats, Jay. All right. Private club. I can't talk today. Private Club Radio listeners, please welcome Jay Johnson. So what's it like going from the Carolinas to Oklahoma?
Well, that's actually, that was a big change, obviously, going from Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, consistently rated top 10 places to live in the U.S. But even before Oklahoma, there was the 2.5-year COVID stop in Kansas. So
forgot about
that was a big change, big transition. You sort of, you're climbing the ladder in your career, and I was very fortunate that I was at 2 great clubs and within a 30-minute drive of each other. So I spent, the anchor part of my career learning the business at 2 great clubs with some great mentors. And then as you sort of navigate through that, the call is going to come. And I've always told my peers and even those that I'm mentoring, you never know when and where the call is going to come from, but you got to be ready whenever the call comes, and be open to the idea that it may not be, a location that you had envisioned. And so kudos to my wife for being open-minded to saying, hey, we're going to chase this dream, because we always knew that becoming the general manager at Prairie Dunes was a club that I hadn't anticipated at the time was on the radar. But once we looked into it, we knew that was truly going to set us where we wanted to be in the long run. And so Um, yeah, that was a cultural shock. But we were also at the time in our lives where, we had our fun, if you will, and we knew it was time to start settle down and start a family. And so the
Mhm.
idea of doing that in a small town made a lot of sense to us. And so we felt like it was a good family move, and it was. Just 6 months after we got there is when COVID hit. And so wife had always thought, yeah, we'll make this move to the Midwest, knowing that there's a main airport within 45 minutes, and she can get back whenever and have family come visit whenever. Well, that just didn't happen once the world shut down. So that created a whole different dynamic that we didn't anticipate going there. But she's a very strong person, and we've been able to kind of navigate through a lot. So it was a
And
change for sure.
I think the last time we talked, because we chatted briefly about this interview, it was a calculated risk is
Yes,
what
yeah,
you I think
and
is what you related it to.
I mean, club managers, as you're kind of going through your career, you definitely, I think, need to make calculated risks, and I think you really need to lean into your mentors and those who you really rely and trust on to help you navigate and make hard decisions. A lot of times, people make hasty decisions, or they jump because they're really attracted by a title, or they're attracted by a few $1,000s more here and there, without sort of a long term vision about where they want to be. And sometimes, it's certainly, you see people that sort of have a tendency to jump around, and I get it. Circumstances and life changes, and sometimes you take a job and it's not what you thought it was. So yeah, it was a calculated risk to go out with a long term vision. We had always anticipated that we were going to be in Hutchinson, Kansas, from a 5 to 10 year window. That was always the plan. We were not looking. Whenever I got a phone call about an opportunity here at Southern Hills, but my wife's initial reaction was, I don't know if I can say it, but was no. The answer is no. If we're making a move from Prairie Dunes, we're going back to the Carolinas. And I was able to at least convince her, say, hey, listen, honey, I think it's at least a call that I should take and just explore and just find out more information. So
It's 2024 and it's time to change the way you vet your new members. Some traditions are worth modifying. The new member process hasn't changed really in the past 150 years, relying almost solely on social relationships and casual interactions, but lacking in factual data. And this is where Kenneth comes in, because the traditional application process tells you very little about someone's behaviors and character until now. Kennis has created an innovative and confidential, comprehensive applicant information gathering process that provides an unrivaled depth of information. The world of member vetting has evolved to a new standard, and Kennis is your turnkey solution to meet this new industry best practice. You can rely on Kennis to provide the facts that you need to make fully educated member decisions, because what you don't know can hurt your club and your members. To learn a little bit more or to set up a call, head on over to membervetting.com, fill out the form. You're going to have a chat with Paul Dank. It's going to be good. He's a great guy. Also, be sure to check out our episodes of Member Vetting here on Private Club Radio.
yeah,
And when I think we were just chatting too, and it turned into a topic for a conversation here on the show. 'Cause I think we were just like, shooting the breeze and just having like a fun conversation. And it was the phrase AGM to GM succession. Blah, blah.
correct.
Let me rephrase it. It was the AGM to GM succession planning.
Correct.
Um, can we dive into that a little bit? Because it started from, I bluntly asked you, what sort of feeling going into, because you went from GM to now AGM, and you know I don't see titles as like a big thing, but some people do. So like I was just more interested, like, hey, did you see that as a demotion? And then what was kind of the game plan from there? And that's when we started talking about the AGM to GM a succession plan and the clubs that have that in place. Can you chat on that for us?
Absolutely. I mean, I feel the assistant GM title, the AGM title, has really grown a lot in our industry in about the last 10 years. And there's a lot of the quote unquote old guard in the business, who have been successful managers for a long period of time, and you're seeing a trend of them needing to think of a retirement plan and what does an exit strategy look like. And I think it's harder to conceptualize when you have a general manager that's very long tenured at an elite club like Southern Hills, because of the fact that there's so much institutional knowledge and relationships that he's forged both locally and nationally, both in the city of Tulsa and the leadership that helps run the state, but also beyond the walls of even the state and the PGA of America and the USGA and the years in history there. So as the board starts wrapping their head around what does retirement look like for Nick, it definitely centered around we would like to get somebody in here that could train and really learn who we are, because the culture here at Southern Hills is very member focused, very staff focused, and Nick has done an exceptional job leading a club at a very high level, and furthermore establishing a staff culture and the department heads that we have here at the club, I would put up against anybody. And every club is probably partial to their own, but we have exceptionally talented leaders here at this club that have done so and established a certain way of doing things. And so there's options available to the board. Can they let Nick just enjoy his last few years and retire, then hire somebody else in? That was certainly an option, but they found a lot more value of trying to preserve that culture as best as possible by bringing somebody in for a period of about a year and a half to work under Nick. And the goal of that was truly to allow me to form relationships and trust, not only with the staff, but also with the governance and with the membership. So kind of going back to your original question, I had worked my way up my career to be an assistant GM at Governors Club and loved my time there, learned immensely. But I was working my way up because I was ready to take that GM jump. And so therefore, when I took the job at Prairie Dunes, I felt like, all right, I'm kind of out of the weeds, if you will, of needing to kind of get over that hump and become a general manager. Because when you go from assistant GM to GM, you almost take on this mindset of I want to prove to the hiring committee that they made the right decision. I want to make them proud that they took a risk on me because I didn't have GM experience. And everyone needs to make that jump at some point. And typically you do it at a smaller club because it's harder for these larger clubs to really wrap their brain around giving somebody an opportunity who doesn't have the experience that they need. So by me going to Prairie Dunes, that equipped me with a experience level that was attractive to the search committee here. And when they started to conceptualize Nick's replacement, they did not want to entertain somebody who did not have previous GM experience. And so that was very clear of their approach in their search process. And they hired club counsel to do this. And so their directive to club counsel was we only want to interview current general managers. So you think about that. What they're saying is we're not even going to look at an AGM to take on a lateral move. We only want GMs who have demonstrated the ability to do it at a high level, and that will be willing to take a step back with the opportunity potentially to follow in Nick's places in Nick's
What
place.
and didn't you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think didn't the board tell you that they like you, they want you to win, they want you to succeed, but you have to earn it. They're not just going to give it to you. So just the fact of you being there, it was like, hey, like you're here, but you still have to earn it. We're still not just going to give it to you. You still have to really put in the work. Do
Yeah,
the
for
what what
sure.
what what has to be done.
Yeah, I draw a lot of sports analogies when I think about leadership out of a club and players want to play. Players want the ball in their hand when the game's on the line. And for me to be given the opportunity to say, honestly, I respected that from the board. When I interviewed here, I knew that when I made it to the final two, I knew I was only one of two, and I respected the fact that they were not going to put all their eggs and guarantee somebody Nick's replacement whenever they only get to know me for basically 24 hours. And because that's rather presumptuous to say, yeah, we just met this guy in the interview process, and we're gonna the future of the club is in your hands. So I totally understood it. I certainly asked for an opportunity to be considered, but they were very clear that respectfully they were not going to guarantee that in the interview, and I understood that. So whenever I accepted the job, I knew that I was kind of in that prove it mentality, and kind of the same mentality whenever I took the job at Prairie Dunes. I wanted to prove to that committee, and I wanted to make that club proud that they took a risk on me. And I took that same mindset here at Southern Hills, where I wanted to prove it to them, and I knew what the task was at hand. I started in April of 22, and then we had the PGA Championship in May. So you sort of hit the ground running, and there was no option of easing into it. And there was some transition going on as well with other departments that were retiring. So here at Southern Hills, there really has been kind of this changing of the guard culture that's happened, where we've had several department heads that have been here for 20 plus years. We've had four of
Wow.
those retire in the last basically year and a half, between our executive assistant and membership director, our CFO retired, our clubhouse manager, and Nick, and all of those were at least 25 years tenure here. And so you start going through that, and there's some nervousness amongst the membership of what does the future look like, and that's totally
Of
natural, right?
course.
So I think you need to fully embrace that and know that, and my job is truly to try and give them a sense of ease and comfort of saying, of sending a message that they're going to continue to enjoy the traditions that they've come to enjoy at Southern Hills seamlessly, while also embracing some new ideas of how we're going to tweak things moving forward. So, yeah, it certainly was a trying time from going from GM to AGM. Sorry, from AGM to GM back to AGM. It was a calculated risk. We knew it was one worth trying, though. So
Yeah, and that's neat that the club wanted a GM to bring them in. It's nice knowing that they had that, which had to make you feel a little what's what I'm looking for. I don't want to say maybe like relaxed or calm or at ease, because they're not just looking for somebody else either. Like they're looking for the right person. So the fact that they're kind of having their due diligence and their kind of rules and things must, I would think from your point of view, be a little calming.
you know, one thing I quickly came to appreciate, and I kind of picked up on this a little bit in the interview process, is an appreciation for the governance of Southern Hills and how they've run the club over the years. These clubs that operate at a high level, that are really highly regarded as operating at a high level, that have a high demand and obviously a rich history of tradition, that doesn't happen by accident. And the more that you ingrain yourself in the culture, you really gain an appreciation for the vision and the leadership that's really executed at these clubs. And that isn't always just solely on the GM's shoulders. A lot of that also is preserved by the board of governors here. And this club truly does not make impulsive decisions. We never take on a project or anything that's going to compromise us and our cash position. And so I've really gained an appreciation for the forethought and how much thought goes in and the intentionality of which they make decisions here. And so, it certainly is. It was a trying time, but at the same time, it was a challenge that I was gladly embraced. And to be honest with you, there's also embedded in all this is the personal side of this. Having my wife take leave Raleigh Durham Chapel Hill to go to Hutchinson, and then once she visited Tulsa, the day that I interviewed here, I met the Kirk Reese at 7 a.m. for breakfast, and I did not see my wife again until about 6 p.m. And during that day, Nick had organized kind of a tour of the city with a realtor, and it was a young lady that was of similar age that we were, and so my wife connected with her, and they just chatted about what it's like to live in Tulsa. This is where the school districts are. These are where the parks are, and so on. And when I saw her at 6 p.m., I could see it in her face and her entire demeanor. Like she could see a future here in Tulsa. And to be honest with you, we absolutely love it here. This city I think geographically, and I grew up in the Southeast. So geographically, I think it's Southeast. People that are in the Southeast think of Tulsa as the Midwest, but culturally, it's got a lot of Southern roots, and it's got a great food scene here. There's a lot of shows that come through here. It's a great city to raise your kids. And my wife has since joined the Chamber of Commerce, and she loves her job, and she's really gotten plugged in.
Concert Golf Partners is changing the game one club at a time. Since their inception in 2001, they've been on a mission to preserve and elevate private clubs, pouring capital into enhancements that matter. But what sets them apart? These aren't your run-of-the-mill operators. They are a dedicated team with a passion for enhancing the private club experience, both on and off the green. It's their commitment to maintaining the club's unique identity while executing strategic improvements that boost the overall experience and financial health. With Concert Golf Partners, your club gains access to a network of enhanced properties, reciprocal play privileges, and a future free from the burden of debt and outdated facilities. They're not just building better clubs, they're crafting lasting legacies for members and communities alike. If you'd like to learn more about Concert Golf Partners or recapitalization or learning how your members will have no more assessments, head on over to concertgolfpartners.com, set up a confidential call with Peter Danula, and that's it. Simple as that. Also, be sure to check out our episodes of Board Chats here on Private Club Radio, brought to you by our friends, you guessed it, Concert Golf Partners. You said it was the club that set up the realtor to hang out with your wife and take her around?
Yeah, and part of that was also kind of a selfish ask because I was asking her what is she going to do throughout the day, and I expressed to Nick her concern with Tulsa. And if you never visited Tulsa, you probably have some preconceived notions. And so I think it was important to me. I had been to Tulsa prior to that interview a handful of times through a club manager's events, and I had played the course. I was familiar, and I knew how special this place was. I knew that it was my goal to at least get Hannah here to see Tulsa and see the club, and then we can make an informed decision. But at least that would give her all the information of what it's like to live. So Nick was the one that kind of spearheaded that whole the facilitating that, and it was very beneficial because you're moving your family, and I genuinely saw this as an opportunity to give Hannah a better opportunity for success as far as her career, as well as our daughter, to give her an opportunity for success and her growth and development.
That's really cool. No, that's a neat move, because they could have did anything. Like they could have just sent her a spa day, or like they could have did so many other things. That's such a good power move. I
Sure.
really like that. What's been some of the challenges, you know, with the AGM to GM succession plan? What's been some of the uphill battles, some of the frustration, some of the things that kind of knock your head against the wall a little bit?
This was a little bit of a unique scenario because I knew Nick personally prior to getting the call about this job, and I knew him from a couple golf trips that we had taken together, and so I gotten to know him on a personal level. In fact, ironically, Prairie Dunes, when they were going through their general manager search in 2019, they called Nick and they said, "Hey, we're looking for a GM. This is the kind of the profile. These are the skill sets that we're looking to identify." And Nick gave them my name as somebody to consider. And then Nick called me and said, "Hey, I don't know where you're at in your career if you're looking, but you might get a call from Prairie Dunes." And so I had known him for probably 5-6 years prior to coming out to the Midwest. And so coming to Southern Hills, you got to be careful because you don't want to lean into this friendship because you're here to do a job and you're here to learn. So you don't want to get too comfortable. You truly understand the task at hand, and the board was very clear, and so was Nick. Nick was extremely honest with me the entire time. He was honest with me about what I was doing well, the feedback that he was getting about things that I needed to do better. And I was very lucky that I felt like I had that transparency. And yes, is there some ego involved whenever you are the GM and you know that you've run a successful platinum club that's a world renowned golf destination? And then now you're kind of taking a back seat, if you will. Yeah, there certainly is. I mean, you got to understand that it's just not your time. And even if Nick and I would have disagreements, and there weren't many, but ultimately I wanted to respect the man who he was and the career that he built, as well as his image and his exit plan too, because he needed to enjoy his last couple of years here, and I wanted to honor that, and I wanted to honor the fact that this was his club. So I really didn't challenge him. If he made a call that maybe I even in my own mind might have not fully agreed with, I didn't challenge really to anybody because I wanted to respect that process. So that was difficult, knowing that it's still his club and you still want to respect him as a leader and what he's established here. So other challenges is there are a lot of traditions and history established here, and you want to truly respect those too. And so a lot of it is members knew that I was here as AGM. It was out amongst the membership that I was the hopeful successor to Nick, but that wasn't confirmed until a year later. So I was very aware that what the opportunity was at hand, and that I needed to prove it, if you will. So it was really learning and establishing yourself. But also, you don't want to become across as the new guy that says, "Hey, this is my club now." You really need to take that velvet glove approach, because you genuinely, like, my biggest task was relationship building and trust building. And you really need to approach that in a way that I feel is collaborative and people feel like they're heard and they're respected. And so there had been times where I probably came across maybe a little too aggressive, and I was thankful of the fact that Nick had pulled me aside and said, "Hey, and kind of coached me through some of that, and that was very, very helpful."
Can you go into that a little bit more? How do you think you were a little aggressive, and what was the situation, and how do you think, looking back on it, you could have handled it a little bit better?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, there are certainly times and opportunities when I felt like the staff needed a stronger leader to really hold them accountable, and really set a level of an expectation that we have for how we operate. And if we're not hitting deadlines, and we're not fully planning ahead, then I felt like it was my responsibility to kind of help show them, what's expected to operate at a high level. And when we come time to for the slower times of the year, which here at Southern Hills, there's really probably about 30 days when it kind of, well, probably about 60 days when it slows down a little bit in January, February. But then once March hits, it really doesn't slow down until New Year's. And so, there was just opportunities where I felt like we needed to make advancements and plan ahead, and revamp certain things, and really just help hold people accountable. And also, I really wanted to get to know the staff, what their interests were, what are their career objectives, what are we doing to make steps towards that, and really help establish and help coach and mentor them. And because I felt that from a clubhouse experience standpoint, they really needed that strong leader presence. And so every now and then people don't respond to that as the way that you may have experienced in the past. And so sometimes you might need to wrap your arm around the shoulder, and make sure they understand you have their best interest at heart. And it's not from a selfish standpoint. It's really trying to help them personally and professionally. That's really always been my style. I want people to work at my clubs. I believe in my team, but if there ever comes a time where maybe their priorities have changed, then I want to help them onto the next step. And I hope that it's here. But if it's not here, that's okay. And people need to understand it's okay to talk about that too.
So having a ton of staff buy-in in there is what I'm looking for. Just having buy-in, just buy-in.
Sure.
I think that's just the other common theme I've just gotten from you. The talk is having buy-in, not just from your staff, but also your spouse and the people around you. Just and it's the same thing now. Like, now that you mentioned the sports and coaching, that's just where like my head
Sure.
wants to go now. Is like sports analogies, but
Yeah. Well, you got to think. I mean, the majority of our staff here is long tenured staff, so they've worked with Nick and know how he operates and how decisive he is. And it was really my job in that succession phase, that year and a half phase, where they're also looking at how I make decisions, how I establish those, and what are my kind of absolutes and what are my non-negotiables. We all have them, and so you're not only trying to operate the club at a high level, but you're also trying to establish, hey, this is who I am, this is how I operate. And I'm always trying to incorporate empathy and sort of the human element side of how we manage. And you got to understand that in the middle of all that, we just come out of a PGA championship in 2022. The world is changing right in front of our eyes as far as the prioritization of what's important to employees, what's important to managers. And so we were kind of navigating through that collaboratively, though, because we were reestablishing what do staffing models look like, and how are we, supporting our staff's desires. And so that it was really good to be part of that, because, um, you know, I mean, how you're compensating your employees, and that was changing rapidly. How you are um, scheduling their hours and what your expectations of their hour commitment, that was changing rapidly. And so I felt like we were trying to stay ahead of that, and I think we did a good job of that. So yeah, it also allowed me to, as we're establishing, process and procedure, have my hands wrapped up in the middle of all that. So that was nice to be a part of.
what advice do you have anybody looking to get into a AGM position?
It's certainly humbling. It was harder than what I thought it was going to be, if I'm being perfectly honest, because I thought it would be a little bit, quote unquote, easier just because I knew Nick. But that doesn't change the fact that it's still a big club.
Oh,
It's still a big operation. There's still a lot going on, and And whenever you work at a club of this status that operates at a high level for as number of years that they have, I kind of thought, well, this will be easy. I know Nick will. I'll work on it for a year and a half, and then I'll transition right in. And the reality is that he's operated at a high level, but a lot of times, and just like the sports world, um, the pros make it look easy. They make it look seamless, and then you get into the weeds, and you're like, wow, it's the game of golf is not as easy as the pros make it look on TV. And so
Yeah.
um, those, yeah.
What What about somebody getting into their first management style position? So their first time, even as like a assistant general manager. Like, what about just like that first style or
Yeah.
that first step into management? What advice do you have for maybe a little bit lower level?
So it certainly is. So club management. If I look back on my career, one thing I wish somebody would have told me at a younger age is that you really get down to people management. Whether you're managing your staff or you're managing members, a lot of times people in this industry are promoted into management because either A, they went to school for it, or B, they were the highest performer in their department, and then they get promoted into a leadership position. And then, but there's really a lot of times, at least especially in today's day and age, people are looking for a lot of responsibility. They're kind of chasing titles versus chasing the substance and the experience level that really going to make you successful once you get that role. So any new club manager getting into the business, I would say ask a lot of questions, be patient, make smart decisions, don't make impulsive decisions. Hopefully, you can identify a mentor that'll truly help coach you along. And I would say don't be too busy because I see it often happen where people they really want the title before they're ready for the position, and that experience level truly benefits you as you start interacting and dealing with difficult member situations, difficult scenarios that maybe you're not equipped until you have the experience of navigating through it. So just be patient and attach yourself to a mentor if you can. You've got to immerse yourself in what the culture of the club is. You can't feel like it's your job to take that on, and also like you got to make your mark, make your presence. You really got to take a seat back and say, how do they operate? How can I enhance this? And don't feel like you got to make your mark in the first year. So
No, yeah, no, that's that has to be tough too because the ego comes into play so much because it wants to show value. It wants to show, hey, I'm the best guy for this or person. I'm the best person for this, position. But at the same time, you still, you do have to learn. Yeah. Oh my goodness, there's so much involved.
yeah, there really is, and what's involved more is just from a mental capacity. Like you need to truly, I think, be very self aware about what's going on, what your role is, where you're at in this moment in time. Not trying to establish or accomplish too much because it certainly comes across as like you're trying to make your mark and you're trying too hard. When really what you need to do is learn the culture, learn the club, how you can best support it, and it takes you a little while to do that. And it takes a little while for the members to truly understand you and what your intentions and your desires are. And you got to kind of navigate through that. All while doing that, you still have a legend that's still in the building and it's still his club. And so, and then the advice that the board gave me in the first 6 months of being GM here was don't feel like you got to make your mark. And we had an internal conversation of no major changes in 2024. Yes, we're going to tweak things that need to be tweaked, but we're not going to establish a new program, a new way of operating in the first year because the membership, I don't think, can handle that type of change given the season that we're in.
See, that has to make it so much easier when I was just gonna say the expectations there, and you just answered my question, which was going to be, pretty much assuming the board had something involved in the fact that they had to say that to you, hey, for 6 months, just take it all in. That has to be so take such a weight off your shoulders in terms of ego and everything, just to go, oh, thank goodness I can just take it all in. There's no expectations of, obviously it's performing, they want to see you in person and doing things, but
Sure.
there's no real set like, hey, we want a complete turnaround and change.
Yeah, and they're not naive enough to think that. And the reality is that I've always said that a change will happen organically, and you shouldn't have to force the change. And if you have to force it, then maybe it's not the right change. So allow that to happen naturally and organically. And I'll never forget the first board meeting I had in January of this year. When I walked away from the board meeting, I got several handshakes and said, "Hey, we could see the benefit of the succession plan with how you ran that board meeting this morning, and that affirmation was very reassuring and comforting, because I genuinely felt like the succession plan had benefited and it paid off, because my sense of comfort and how I wanted to operate and confidence really what came across pretty natural, and that nothing was forced. So there's definitely a sense of ease in stepping into that role versus a turnkey situation. And now I'm trying to figure out where the light switches are. At the same time, I'm trying to figure out what everyone's name is, and establish myself. So it definitely helps in this scenario when you're following a long tenured GM to kind of have that succession process.
And to have such a open-minded, welcoming, and engaged board, it sounds like,
Yeah,
also, which is very, very good. You don't get
absolutely.
that a lot.
No, you
Or I
genuinely
shouldn't say
don't.
that, but
You genuinely don't. And I mean, every club is different, right? And there are so many clubs out there that identify a great GM or a great candidate for a position, but maybe that candidate's personality traits and how they like to manage and what they value doesn't align with the club. I've seen it happen many times where you have a great club manager, but maybe he's not the best fit for that club and that club culture. And so I think the two need to mesh, and that's part of what that interview process is hey, is this person going to fit into our club culture, and do they understand that? So it's a challenge, but I think being humble and staying humble and being self-aware and relying on your mentors. I honestly, one of my biggest things that Nick would mentor me on was Jay, you don't need to do everything yourself. You need to trust your managers, that they're high operators, they're high level operators. Trust them to do the job and just support them. And versus feeling like they're not expecting you to come in with an idea, they want you to support their ideas. And so Nick was extremely influential in this entire thing, helping coach me through this. So I'm very lucky in that regard.
sir, thank you so much for being on. I appreciate this. You're a gentleman and a scholar.
Thank you, Denny.
Hope you all enjoyed that episode. Thank you so much for coming on, Jay, and sharing and opening up. And once again, congrats on the new addition to your family. 2 kids, amazing accomplishment. If you have not done so already, like, share, subscribe. You can sign up for our newsletter, which we send you all the content that we release on the channel, all the episodes, as well as some other goodies. You can get that at privateclubradio.com. That's your episode. I'm your host, Denny Corby. Catch you on the flippity flip.